It's the real news. I'm Aaron Matek. Jared Kushner has major responsibilities in the White House of his father-in-law, President Donald Trump. One of his tasks includes finding a solution, the White House says, to Middle East peace. Well, a recent report in the New York Times raises new questions about Kushner's potential conflicts of interest. A major backer of the Kushner family's real estate empire is the nephew of an Israeli billionaire who's now under investigation in the U.S. and other countries for corruption. Joining me to discuss this is Shir Hever, Real News correspondent. Hello, Shir.
Hi, Aaron. Thanks for having me.
So talk to us about what this report revealed about Kushner and his ties to this family that is being investigated for corruption.
It's, of course, not unusual that wealthy people have extensive contact with each other, and the fact that the Kushner family used a lot of financing from billionaires to bankroll the real estate empire surprises no one. What Jesse Drucker of the New York Times revealed, however, is that the particular group financing the Kushner family is the Steinmetz group, specifically Raz Steinmetz, and he's the nephew of Benny Steinmetz. And Benny Steinmetz is now has been arrested in Israel, actually, and investigated by the police for alleged corruption crimes that he committed in Guinea, in Africa. So his company, BSGR, which is Benny Steinmetz Group Resources, owns a lot of mines in Guinea. It made its fortune with when Benny Steinmetz and his brother, Daniel Steinmetz, have together made this fortune in the diamond industry. Then he moved to mine other kind of resources. And Daniel Steinmetz is now retired. He allowed his son to continue on doing the business, his son Raz. So obviously this is a very close connection between the two. And they are developing mines in Guinea. But the Guinean government is now accusing Benny Steinmetz of bribing senior officials in order to give them mining concessions. And this has been revealed also by the Global Witness organization, and is now investigated by the FBI and led to the arrest of Benny Steinmetz.
And so if this Uncle Steinmetz has a nephew who is financially backing the family of Jared Kushner, and Jared Kushner is the top White House official overseeing Middle East peace, that means the Steinmetz family has a very friendly ear in the United States at the top levels of its government.
Right. So this is, of course, not new. The Steinmetz family, both Daniel Steinmetz and Benny Steinmetz, have already given extensive donations to Rudy Giuliani from the Republican Party back in 2007. Now, the kind of support that they gave to the Kushner family is mainly giving them loans. That means that the Kushners are in their debt, basically. That certainly gives them a leverage. The issue is, of course, that the Steinmetz family, Benny Steinmetz lived most of his life in Belgium. The corruption cases in Guinea, and the money was mostly in Switzerland, and it's investigated by the FBI because the bank that was allegedly used to transfer bribes was in the U.S. There's also been one of the Guinea senior officials wore a wire and got records of the Steinmetz Steinmetz family representative trying to get the Guinea government to destroy documents. So that further incriminates them in this business. But the interesting thing is, of course, how all this relates to Israel, which doesn't have any of those mines in it.
Well, explain that a little bit.
Yeah. So the point is that Benny Steinmetz, and this is the point that is missing from the New York Times report, because the New York Times report talks about the possible corruption and whether indeed Benny Steinmetz, the uncle, is directly related to the Kushner family, or is it only his nephew? And that tie is not completely clear. Although Benny Steinmetz has recently moved his assets to the foundation of his brother, the father of Raz Steinmetz, so that kind of makes that connection. But in order to avoid sanctions from the Guinea government. But the thing is that Benny Steinmetz moved to Israel, and he's been investigated by the Israeli police because I think he believes, or he hopes at least, that that might get him a way out of that problem. He hired to defend himself the lawyer Alan Dershowitz, who's not a very well-known expert on corruption law, especially not African corruption law, but Alan Dershowitz is a close personal friend of Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, and he's a very well-known propagandist for the Israeli government and for Israeli policies. And what Steinmetz is trying to claim through Alan Dershowitz and through other channels as well, is that in fact this whole case against him, this whole corruption case, has been fabricated by George Soros, who is a much bigger billionaire. And he's accusing George Soros of being sort of anti-Israeli, although this accusation is preposterous. George Soros supports various Israeli organizations and Zionist organizations, but he's a scapegoat for the extreme right. And Steinmetz is saying they're only after me because I'm Israeli. And this line of defense is very weak, of course, but this is exactly what puts Jared Kushner in a very problematic political position, because Jared Kushner is now being drawn into this kind of politics of using the Israel defense against crimes that have nothing to do with Israel about these corruption cases. And if he's supposed to be a mediator of the Middle East peace process, then of course that prevents any chance of him doing a kind of objective job.
Yeah, Shir, what's funny about the George Soros defense is that it mirrors what we see in internet forums, that propagate conspiracy theories. And it's curious to see that being used here as the defense in a corruption case involving a billionaire.
Yeah, actually, Breitbart news editor Peter Schweitzer just recently wrote a piece blaming, and the way that Breitbart News, the alt-right news platform, has portrayed it, is to say that actually George Soros is funding Kushner. So to try to create a kind of equivalency as if Soros is now actually forcing or trying to sway the Trump administration into the far left, into the anti-Israeli far left. And that is, of course, ridiculous. But this also shows that they believe in Breitbart News that this kind of conspiracy theory can actually have an effect on people. And I think the fact that Alan Dershowitz also agrees to represent Benny Steinmetz in this case shows that he also believes that if he makes the case that Benny Steinmetz was only accused because of sort of anti-Israeli sentiment, organizations like Global Witness are actually some kind of anti-Israeli conspiracy, that he could somehow get out of being convicted.
Well, a very interesting story that adds a new layer to the web of corruption and conflict of interest issues surrounding this unusual Trump White House. Shir Hever, Real News correspondent, thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much for having me.
And thank you for joining us on The Real News.